Let's go to Andrew Clennell, the New South Wales political editor at The Australian. Andrew, give us or explain to our viewers why so much drama over this rogue campaign by Jim Molan and his supporters.
Well, I think for a number of reasons, but I guess it's another situation where there are people on the Conservative side of the Liberal Party who won't accept a pre-selection outcome. And look, I think there's a pretty fair argument that Jim Molan should be further up the ticket, a very strong argument, but he joined the Liberal Party, he got involved in a pre-selection, they changed the rules and he still lost. And yet he's pulling resources away essentially to say, vote for me, below the line. And of course the Nationals aren't happy with this because they could do this all the way along. It's a joint Liberal National ticket. They could have done this all the way. So they're sort of saying, stuff you, which is an extraordinary intervention. But I think it kind of means that the election campaign finishes where it almost started a few months ago in terms of division in the coalition. And John Howard, Kieran, famously said division is death in politics. If Scott Morrison loses on Saturday night, there's no doubt in my mind the main reason for it, when there's only going to be 1% or so in it, will be the division between the Conservatives and the moderates in the Liberal Party. And, you know, how they've been fighting for years. And, you know, the left and the right and the Labor Party hate each other, but they haven't had all these public spats that these guys have. And they need to get their act together, frankly. I mean, it's just crazy. And New South Wales has always been a hotbed for this. It's one of the reasons the Libs were out of power here for 16 years at the state level. And now we're seeing the manifestation of that at the federal level. And, you know, ultimately Scott Morrison was a compromise candidate. He was the centre-right faction. Dutton was from the right. Turnbull was from the left. So they've ended up with that. And Morrison's done a reasonable job of papering over the cracks. But to have this division again in the final couple of days in the coalition is just quite damaging, I think.
Well, who are the figures that you could blame here for this division? I mean, it's hard to point any finger at one person, but, you know, Malcolm Turnbull was rolled because he was apparently too far to the left, and now the candidates on the right or centre right or far right, whatever you want to describe it as, are looking like being wiped out.
Yeah, well, one of the things we should be looking for on Saturday night are the seats with Conservative candidates and how they go. It's a real test for them. Peter Dutton in Dixon, Tony Abbott in Warringah, and Christian Porter in Pearce. And it'll be interesting to see how these guys go. But, I mean, I think, you know, when there's a breakdown in relationships, both sides are at fault, usually. And I think that's what's happened here. There's just been an inability of people to coalesce together and ensure that the division isn't out there in the public eye. And ultimately Turnbull fell because of his personality as well. His colleagues just didn't like him. They didn't like his attitude. They didn't like the way he sort of treated some of them. He had Dutton and Cormann on board for a while, but they just couldn't cop him. So that was sort of personality coming into the mix. But there's no doubt that the Liberal Party, even if they were to win on Saturday night, need to do something about this ongoing division. Yeah. They need to seriously address it.
And then, Andrew, I would argue that the coalition more broadly has to extend that self-analysis if, as expected, they do go down. Because if you look at the situation right now, we're 48 hours from election day, and I couldn't agree with you more with how damaging all of this is. You've got Barnaby Joyce on radio this morning, you know, continuing his campaign to return to the leadership, having a crack over the Molan matter. You've got the Molan divisions, as you've put it, so, you know, clearly this morning in New South Wales. Then you go a bit further south to Flinders in the Mornington Peninsula, and Alex Turnbull making robocalls in favour of Julia Banks. This is a party riven with all sorts of dislikes, hatreds, division. If they win, if Scott Morrison wins on the weekend, he will not only be a hero, he would have achieved a modern miracle.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have the margin to start with, which Turnbull can be blamed for. He should have had a better victory in 2016 with what he had. And I think the resentment started stemming from there. You know, he must be just tearing his hair out, Scott Morrison, what he has left, because how on earth can you go to the poll on Saturday with this kind of division right at the end? Like I say, it's a reminder of the problem, and there's a reason Bill Shorten's saying like 1,000 times end the chaos. It's all about that, and you know, obviously it's history repeating itself in the sense the whole Rudd-Gillard fight didn't help Labor and caused them to lose power eventually. So,
Andrew, it comes down to sections of the Liberal Party just not in line with the Liberal Party base. I mean, but I think still some people within the party are still trying to work out what the base is, or are confused about what the base is, or how big the base is. So, I mean, are they just not aligned? Are the far right not in line with the Liberal Party base, or is it something else?
Well, the far right actually is in line with the Liberal Party base,
right,
Laura. It's kind of the people who are passionate enough to join the party are more right wing, generally. It's the same way
but
that
there's a difference
the left
between the base and the voting base, isn't there?
Oh, the membership and the voting base.
Yeah.
Yeah, who can say what a voting base is these days when the primary votes are in the 30s? You know, and the base in Queensland's vastly different to the base in New South Wales, which is different again to the base in Victoria, which is really the main problem. I mean, they brought Morrison in because they thought he had a better chance in Queensland than Turnbull, which was true, but Turnbull would have had a better chance in Victoria. So you kind of lose both ways. And to be that sort of centre-right party that attracts both constituencies, well, it's a bit of a tightrope act, isn't it?
We've got the other big unknown in this campaign is the preference flow from the minor parties. One of those parties, One Nation, Pauline Hanson, was on the Nine Network a bit earlier this morning and was in a feisty mood 48 hours out from the election.
I suppose in light of all the things you've faced, all the scandals, all that's been going on, can you really blame people for having their doubts about One Nation and considering Clive over you?
In the last election, we were at 1.3% in 2016. The polls are indicating 4%. The Essential poll has got us at 6.6%. I've actually gone up since the last election. Unlike your show, Deb, since you've actually taken over, you've actually gone down in your viewership. So should you hand over your job, or should we bring Carl back?
Yeah, obviously touched a sensitive nerve there with Pauline, didn't it,
boy.
Andrew?
That was great. Look,
Yeah,
I'm speechless, Karen.
Yes.
Look, you know, there's no doubt she's feeling the pressure from Palmer, but who wouldn't be feeling the pressure from a minor party in your space that's spent about $50 million on advertising? Thank God the blackout's on. But look, I mean, I think that
thank God
they're certainly more worried in New South Wales, and I know One Nation's only running in 4 or 5 lower house seats here, but they're certainly more worried, the Labor Party, about Clive Palmer.
Well, quickly,
they feel like...
Look at those New South Wales seats, because I know you've been keeping a very close eye on them. There's been pointed out to me today that Bill Shorten hasn't been criticised for not facing the press club. This is traditional. Leaders usually do this, face questions from the press gallery in Canberra in the dying days of the campaign. I think the last person not to do it was John Hewson. The other thing I've just been told is that apparently Warren Mundine has been pulled from all interviews. Labor's been told that he's not allowed to do interviews anymore, so I don't know whether that is true. But how are things going in Gilmore?
Gilmore's 50-50, Reid's 50-50, Robertson's 50-50. Abbott's got an uphill battle in Warringah, but could fall over the line or could fall just under the line. So those are the 4 seats to really watch. Put down, I'm told, I might be being misled, but I'm told put down Lindsay as a Labor loss. You know, you've got a few others like Dobell and Macquarie, which are at the margins, but really the 4 or 5 I mentioned are the ones. The Nats have gone ahead in Cowper where Oakeshott is, so looks like we won't be getting a 17-minute speech anyway.
Andrew, well, that's, you know, every cloud, silver lining and all that. Thanks, mate. We'll talk to you soon.